The Empire cannot win. If it goes up in flames,
It will burn very brightly.
We must stand together. We will be crushed.
welcome to the rebellion.
Okay, welcome everyone to our final Andor review show. The last 3 episodes have dropped and we're here to discuss them and review them. There will be spoilers as always, so make sure you're up to date before you watch this. We have friends everywhere, so we've brought a few in to join our Rebel Alliance. They are the Universal Toy Collector Stu, Shabby Geek,
Hello.
and we've brought back the Andor superfan Scott Whitehouse to impart his knowledge on us. How are you doing, guys? Are you all good?
All right.
Yeah,
All
good.
good,
All
Thanks.
thank
all excited to talk about these last 3 episodes?
I am, yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent. Excellent. Well, as always, we have to find out your thoughts on the first 3 arcs. I'm going to go to you first, Shabby. How were the earlier arcs for you?
Loved them all of them. I was just thinking, I've said before that, and I think I said it when the last time we in Andor season 1. I love the fact that it's done like a novel, that it's a bit more, bit more thoughts gone into it, and it's a little bit slow. But I like that. I've got to admit, I do. And I just like the way when we see little Easter eggs or they talk about certain planets and stuff, they treat you like you've been with them for years. It's like a grown-up Star Wars, like they've grown up with you, and this is where we are now. So I've absolutely loved it. Brilliant show.
Yeah, absolutely. Stu, how about yourself?
I'll admit the first 3 episodes I wasn't that struck on, to be honest. I thought it was very slow. I thought the acting wasn't great in certain scenes.
Why do you hate Star Wars? Stu?
Interesting.
I knew you were going to say that. I personally could have done without the Emmerdale in space, to be honest with you, with the crops in the fields and stuff like that. But from then on, it did start to pick up, and I thought the last 3 episodes were absolutely superb. There was some.
Yeah.
There's still some moments that I weren't too keen on, and we get to those a bit later. But overall, I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's the best
Good.
Star Wars stuff we've had for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah. Scott, we had you on week 2. And you had it. Did you have it at 8.5? Was it or 9 at that point?
I think I was
I think
on
it was
8.5. Yeah,
8.5. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Maybe something like that. Yeah, no,
You
Well, after last week's arc, that would have gone up. I thought last week's arc was absolutely fantastic. It really picked up the pace, and some momentous things happening. I thought it was brilliant last week. I probably about 9.25, something like that.
Okay.
Wow.
What about you, Stu? Where are you at so far? Rating?
Up to the point of before these first 3 episodes, I would have said I would have been quite happily at probably a 6.57. But then after the last 3 episodes, that's shot right up to a 9.
A 9. Okay. Yeah. And Shabby?
Yeah, 9.5 around there. I just think it's so well done, and it's so refreshing to sit down and enjoy Star Wars again. I love that's my favorite thing. For all the times we've moaned about it and we've complained about it and so forth, I think we seem to forget we love this franchise. It's something that's brought us all together. It's something we all share in love, and so to sit down and thoroughly enjoy Star Wars again. That's my favorite thing, to be honest. So
Yeah. Well, Martin, what were you at? I can't remember. Was it 9.5?
I think I was just 8.5. I went from
8.5.
8 to 8.5. So I'm teetering near the 9 point at this point before we review these 3 episodes.
Yeah, good. Well, let's go on with these episodes then. We'll try and sort of go through them a bit more chronologically and try not to jump about, which is what we're prone to do on this show. But we'll go with episode 10 first, which was called Make It Stop. Mostly it was the Luthen and Claire story with bits of the Imperials in there, which was pretty awesome. They started off with the Luthen Lonnie scene. Shabby, was peak spy thriller. What did you make of Luthen's, or what did you make of that scene in general and Luthen's decision to kill Lonnie? Do you think that was necessary?
yeah, 100%, because it's had that spy aspect all the way through it, and you remember the saying in Roll One that what things have done, for the rebellion, and bad things have done for the rebellion. So it fits straight in. To me, throughout this whole finale, the Luthen and Clara story, is that the way you say her name? Clara, is it? Or
Claire.
Claire.
Claire, yeah.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I like the way it went, flashbacks. It was an I couldn't work that out because you couldn't really see it because it was from her perspective, wasn't it, looking out through that grate in the ship. So was he part of the Imperial? Because I couldn't get hold of that. It was like a mud trooper outfit did he have on or something? That's what people were saying, but I couldn't get that. But you know, the best thing for me is, you know, when you get character, and what Star Wars has been famous for since the 70s is you get these characters that you could have shows themselves in. You could easily watch a Luthen and Claire story, if you will, you know. So I thought it was so beautifully done. And things like when they were on Naboo as well, because you knew it was Naboo, and he, you know, and you know, and the way he talks to them and the way he says, you know what I mean? If you press it, this is it. And teaching her as well, don't just turn. And I superb, I loved it.
Yeah, the young Claire did a very good job, I thought, acting like the older Claire.
Yeah.
There was pretty much tension throughout this episode, wasn't it, Scott? None more so than maybe the Dedra in the antique store. A good back and forth there.
So good.
Absolutely incredible, wasn't it? I mean, it was just so tense, and you weren't quite sure. I mean, you felt pretty certain why she was there, and at any moment the ISB were going to sweep in. But I mean, their dialogue was just fantastic, like a cat and mouse playing with words. You know, it was just absolutely incredible. And the moment she opened that and pulled out the Star Path unit, and there's his face, it was.
He knows,
You know, I mean, incredible acting from two brilliant actors, and you know, sort of culmination of her chase of Luthen, which has gone over sort of like 4 years or something over the show. You know, it was absolutely tremendous, and of course that's his last moment as well, isn't it? Because of course he takes his life at that point, and although he lives longer, that's where his story ends.
That's it. Yeah.
So that is such a momentous moment in the story. But then the way they rush in, the excitement at the moment that, you know, the ISB rush in, try and stop what he's done in the back, and the Doctor rushes in, pushes her out the way, and he's out in the air. The way that's all edited and cuts away then to Claire looking in distress at what's happened, and you know, and then the episode picks up even more from there. I thought so. Just
do you mind if I just say add something to that I'd like to ask you all? Do you think it was a moment of relief for Lutheran as well, that eventually that's it, it's over? Because I got that feeling that the way he was talking, the way he just went back into himself, and he was just like, listen, we're everywhere and all that. But the way he was talking, like, it's over.
I think he was expecting he knew it was going to happen at some point. He knew that they were going to catch up with him at some point. So I think he's prepared himself for that kind of eventuality when that he does get sprung and caught. So I think he always was expecting it. So it wasn't like a great shock to him, was it? Oh God, I've been sprung. I think he knew.
Yeah, that's the thing, because he didn't argue back. No, you're wrong and all that. He just went with it as if to say, you know what, it's over. And you know, I loved that part.
I totally agree. And if we think back to that amazing monologue he did in season 1, he said that he would never see the fruits of his work. He knew that he wasn't going to make it. So this was, and I thought one of the lines that he said while she was in the shot was, "The rebellion isn't here anymore. It's flown away. It's now everywhere." I thought that was, it was just absolutely fantastic.
Well, like, let's talk about Luthen stabbing himself, because when he was holding that antique knife, did anyone else expect him to be stabbing Dedra?
No.
Well, they did a clever thing where when she handed back the knife to him, they focused on her hands. So at first I was thinking, oh, there's some sort of poison on that knife, and they're both gonna die, because they made a real point of keeping the camera fixed on her hands, even though she'd given the knife back. So yeah, I think, but that obviously in hindsight, that was there to fool us into, you know, realizing what he's actually going to do and stab himself. So yeah.
Stu, we see the origin story then from there on, essentially, of Luthen and Claire. What were your thoughts on the flashbacks? Do you think it sort of enhanced their characters?
I quite enjoyed that. I thought that was good, because it gave you a little bit of depth on the characters, and we've said with the past couple of like series that we've seen from Star Wars, there's not been really much character development or backstory on these characters. But this didn't seem rushed or anything like that. It was very well thought out, very well written. It was acted perfectly, I felt. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I love the way that he was like sort of like teaching her certain things, how to behave, and am I your daughter now? When it's
Only
necessary,
when
then
it's-
So he's So I thought that was really well written. I enjoyed that part. I really did. I wasn't too keen on the fact that the ISB come rushing in and the emergency service comes rushing in, because it just took me back to Casualty, at the UK series and stuff like that. So so,
Dear me.
like I say, I enjoy it, but there's some parts when I think, does that really need to be in there? They could have done without those kind of bits and
Making
bobs
it
and
too
stuff like that.
realistic, sometimes too close to home.
Yeah. It's with Star Wars, it's a galaxy set far, far away, and this is not saying that we don't need to see these things, or these things aren't actually happening in that galaxy, but we're making it too relatable to Earth, and I think that's what kind of like takes it away from me in certain aspects. But
Okay.
other than that, it was all right. It was okay.
Well, and well, with the flashback scenes, they sort of intertwined it really nicely with what Claire was doing in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
Martin, there's good sort of tension going on in the hospital as well, wasn't there? And I was saying they matched up those scenes quite nicely, like when she was going to blow up the bridge as a youngster, and then she blows up the car park. How did you enjoy all of that, Martin?
Yeah, well, first of all, getting to see Naboo again for the first time since the prequels was just, I mean, that's, for me, that was just a nice little touch. Really enjoyed that. Didn't need to do it, but I thought, it was nice. But yeah, the whole hospital infiltration, if you like, and putting all the troops, sending them all off after the explosions, and getting to his hospital bed, etc. It's just another example of what this series has done so well. Is wraps up the tension so much that you're genuinely not sure whether she's going to make it or not, because it's that tense. I have to say, I've had a lot of MVPs in this show, and after these 3 episodes and that we just had, I've changed my mind again. It's gone from Dedra to Andor, back to Dedra, but Kreia for me is the best character in this show.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you know what,
Very underrated,
Martin?
isn't he? Very underrated.
I
Yeah,
have in my notes, I have about that, because Andor was her first acting role, and to do what she does, like Elizabeth Dulau, the actress, is, and this season really shows just how good she was. And I've written in my notes that she's my favorite character of season 2 as well. So
yeah. I mean, I
brilliant.
want to talk a bit more about Luthen later, but so bring me back to that if you don't mind. But yeah, I mean, that whole scene intertwined with the flashbacks was incredibly, I say it like it's a shock, but this series has shown week after week that the editing and the direction and
I was just
the
going to say, it took its
cinematography.
time, didn't it, Martin?
Yeah,
It took its time to
exactly.
get there. It wasn't in a rush. It wasn't edited like she's up the stairs. It was superb the way they did it. I agree.
Exactly. Yeah, it was phenomenal, and it was one of the most touching scenes where she finally gets to him. She closes out the window so no one can see inside. He was a father figure to her, but they weren't particularly, they didn't love each other like that particularly. You kind of got the impression that they were both wanted the same thing, but she resented him a little bit, but she also loved him. And it was such a touching moment when she pulls the life support off, and that single tear rolls down. I just thought absolutely brilliantly acted. And then as she walked in the room, they just focused on Luthen alone on that bed. No plaudits for what he'd achieved. No one knew who he was really, because no one was able to find out. And again, they gave us so much but gave us so little at the same time, and I just think that was absolutely magical. I thought it was an amazing scene, amazing episodes. So
yeah. Well, I mentioned last week then about Luthen sort of not appearing so much in this. Were you expecting him to die? So I mean, okay, we're in episode 10 here, but were you expecting him to die this early, or were you expecting like a big send off towards the end, something a bit more heroic? Martin.
Is that too? Oh, it's me.
Yeah, I'll just jump in because you had something else to say on Luthen. So
sorry. I did expect him to go quite early on, because I knew they had to get to the point where we're going to see Andor getting ready for Rogue One. So I knew we were going to have a bit of bit of lead up to that. Again, that's something else I want to ask the panel a bit later. But yeah, I'll say it now. I was going to say it to the end, but for me, Andor should have been called Luthen because basically the whole show is about how Luthens created this network and created this rebel alliance, and it also showed that everybody who is part of the rebel alliance on Yavin 4 doesn't really think much of him, but really they owe their existence to this one man. And
Yeah.
this series has shown his journey from with the flashbacks now, even more context to it, from this guy who would sell jewelry and then sell a higher bit of jewelry to getting a jewelry shop on Coruscant and being able to meet Mon Mothma to raise the funds and have different cells all around the galaxy to all of a sudden create this one rebel alliance on Yavin 4 that's actually become a military operation. And that's really essentially down to Luthen. And what a story that is. What a fantastic story. And Andor, in a way, is the tool the show's used to sort of show what Luthen has done for the Rebel Alliance and the eventual downfall of the Empire. So, yeah, amazing. I'll shoot that.
I mean, I thought as a character, I thought he was very well portrayed, and I thought Stellan Skarsgård done a great job. And I know Star Wars is normally with characters and stuff like that, and actors, they don't go for the big names, but I mean, he, really, his acting was absolutely superb, and he was the center point of every sort of like scene he was in, the dialogues that he had, and the chats that he had with certain people and stuff like that. I mean, I think it was only a couple of weeks back when he met who was the guy, Lung,
Lonnie
Young.
Young.
Lonnie Young, when he said, "Oh yeah, I need an end game. There needs to be an end game." I thought that speech was brilliant as well. It's just, he's had some real great dialogue, and and for me, I was pretty surprised that he died when he did and how he did. I wasn't expecting him to go out that kind of way, but I guess he's done so much, and then to have like a kind of like an underrated death like that, so to speak, it is quite fitting, really, because he's like an unsung hero. Like you say,
he's an everyman, and that's why I liked him, because I've heard the shows and people say, "I'd love him to be a Jedi." I never wanted it. I wanted him just to be normal and everyman. He was determined and hell bent on doing what he thinks is right, and he portrayed it beautifully. He was just a sergeant in the military that obviously, realized what was going on and dedicated his life in a way to helping other people and to building something against this empire. And I just thought it was lovely. The missed opportunity for me after the speech in season 1, I knew he was going to go. I knew he was going to die, but I would like to have seen him died in front of a sunset or something, to see a son he'd never see, to actually get that part in it. So I would have liked to have seen like that kind of thing. But no, I think don't touch that character. I think it was perfect as is.
Yeah.
Scott. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's not a lot else to say really, but I mean, he gave an incredible performance. I thought it was really interesting how Andor, who'd been drifting away from him during this season, was then defending him on Yavin to the others and saying, "You wouldn't be here but for him. And the only reason the rebellion is what it is." And I thought that was really good that Andor had kind of come full circle again with him.
Yeah,
I really liked that about it. But I just think Stellan Skarsgård did an incredible job. I just think the writing.
Absolutely.
There's not a lot else to say. Everyone's covered it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on then to episode 11, which was called Who Else Knows? This was the ISB trying to chase down Claire, and we see a bit more of Yavin Rebel base as well. So the tension continues as Supervisor hits, placed everything on Dedra, and well, the Dedra and Krennic scene, I think I'll jump to first, because wow, how brutal was that scene, Shabby?
You realize why there's things as actors and people that you look up to or take your breath away. Her acting and her character was just, you could not move when she was on. The way she portrayed that character was just unbelievable. And it's funny in it because she made it out like she didn't want the glory, and of course she did, and it's funny even to the very end when she was being interrogated. She's like, "What have I done?" Do you know what I mean? She couldn't actually get hold of the fact that, you should be thanking me. You should be, I found him and that kind of thing. But you knew it as well. As soon as Luthen died in that art gallery, you thought, "Oh, you are in trouble." She was just brilliant. And the way he put his finger on top of her head,
Oh,
we all
Yeah,
went,
that
"Oh."
was
It's so-
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I miss that kind of thing when you're so invested and you're like, no way, what's he? And then he
Yeah.
grabs her face at the end. I think we'll do all right without you, or something like that. He said, and I just thought, this is, he's just a masterpiece. Loved it.
Yeah, Ben Mendelsohn. Talking of good
Oh,
actors, Scott,
so
how
good.
good did he play that role? He was just perfect throughout.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, that scene is so intense. He's utterly terrifying. I mean, she was
He
terrifying,
really is.
but he was incredibly intense. I mean, Shabby said the way he grabbed her face and kind of shoved her back was,
Yeah.
it was just, it just discarded her really. Again, brilliantly written, brilliantly performed, utterly compelling. And yeah, he picked her up. And you know, why did you go in there all smug on your own? Why did you do that? And so he immediately pointed out, he knew what she got wrong, and she had. So yeah, I thought that was just an incredible scene.
But it goes with the smugness. Do you not think, Scott, of the Empire? They are that smug. Their egos are that big. That's, in a way, even though it was shocking and oh, she's done that. But when you sit back and think about it, that's what all of them would have done. Exactly the same thing, because their egos were that big and, you know what I mean? So smug. I just thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stu?
Yeah, that scene for me, I think, has probably got to be one of the best scenes in the series. When he walked through the door, the way he delivered his lines, the way he was, his mannerisms, and it's nice to see someone actually scared of another character other than Darth Vader and the Emperor. Because no, he's not got like force powers and stuff like that. He doesn't use a lightsaber, but his delivery of speech was that intimidating. I felt the tension. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. And what I like about that kind of thing is, how cutthroat it is in the Empire. They are all out for the glory. They're all out for personal glory. They want to get promoted. They want to get noticed. And just the littlest mistake can cost you dearly. And that's what happened to Dedra. She got found out. And the two of them, I thought they were superb all the way through. And it would have been great to have seen a little bit more Krennic in the series on the whole. But yeah, just perfectly played out. Really fantastic acting and a great scene.
Yeah. Martin, anything?
Yeah, just that in that scene there was kind of a hidden dialogue to show actually the Empire aren't quite as controlled as they think you are, because Dedra had managed to find out about Project Stardust and the Death Star and all these things that happened, and she wasn't privileged to that information. So as tightly as Krennic thought that he had held all this information, it was actually getting out quite a bit. So I thought that was a nice little sort of intertwined into the dialogue to sort of show the audience that the Empire's losing it a little bit now. It's not like it was 10 years previous or even 5 years previously. And the guys have covered all the other stuff in terms of the scene itself. But you can, when you watch Rogue One now, you can understand the pressure that Krennic's under, because he's actually chasing down the leaks from Andor, not from Rogue One. So yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
But seeing him in this makes me appreciate him even more now in Rogue One, because again, because it was a film and it was like a standalone film, you didn't really get to see that much character development within, but to see him in this and then now to see him in Rogue One, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I like the way he said, you knew about it, but you didn't do anything about it. You didn't say anything about it. You failed to mention it or something like that. And I like I say, the way he delivered those lines and the way he was in his acting, I just thought, absolutely.
The other thing as well is the book Catalyst, because in Catalyst it explains that Krennic's had to work just as much as Dedra has because he's not from that environment. And so they always looked down on him in a way, like, oh, and so hence why he got Galliner, so and he was so forced and so hellbent. And you saw it in this because of the way he lost his temper with Dedra. You could see he's got a lot on his plate and he has to do twice as much to let these people accept it. So I absolutely loved that part too. And it's funny as well, it's the disgust on top of disgust who rank in the Empire. He said something about Lonnie Jung and she went, young, like that, as if to say it. But he was doing the same thing to Dedra. And so I love that aspect of it, that rank actually means something in the Empire, and it's, it was flawless.
And when he
Yeah.
lost his temper, it makes you understand why he loses his temper with Tarkin in episode 1, saying, "Oh, taking
Hit the nail
credit
on
for
the
my
head.
achievement," sort of thing. And
Perfect. Yeah.
that makes perfect sense now, because you're thinking,
Mhm.
who is this guy? You know, who is he? Like, having to go at Tarkin, and now you realise you know a little bit more about him, and it just sort of like makes a bit more sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, because Tarkin wouldn't have known anything about the Death Star until about 6 months previous to
Yeah.
Rogue One. So he's been working on that project for 10 years, and then he just
Yeah.
comes in, and they
Yeah.
even mentioned Yularen didn't even know about it, did he?
Although Tarkin is watching it constructed at the end of Revenge of the Sith, isn't he? So presumably he's got.
That's true. That is very true.
Oh, yeah.
You might have picked up
But I think it goes back to what I was saying, though. I think they knew the way the Empire and the way they portrayed Krennic in Catalyst, he was never going to get it. There's no way. You know what I mean? It's like having a young Premier League star at 19 coming up, but if you're going to pay 50 million for a proper play, do you see what I mean? It's kind of like that kind of. And so I think Tarkin always knew about it, like Scott said, since then, but left it, let somebody else do all the work, and I'll come in and take over.
Absolutely, yeah. I think especially if anything went wrong, in case it didn't pan out, then it would. Krennic was for the fall if it didn't pan out. But it did. The moment they fire it and it works, Tarkin takes over, and he says, I'll be taking over the project I told the Emperor about many years previously. He says something like that. And I think that's how Tarkin's probably managed everything.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So next, then we move over to Yavin 4 again. Good to see K2 back. How did you guys feel about the humor and the chemistry between him, Cassian, and Melshi as they're sort of playing the cards and whatnot? Shabby, good to have
I
him
liked
back.
it. I like his character. You've never seen a droid like K2 before. They're usually cutesy or they're funny or arrogant and this and that. And he's sarcastic and he's
sarcasm.
He's funny. I mean, the CGI on him, it looked good in Rogue One. That was 10 years ago. So, I mean, to look at it now, but what a great character he is. And I do like the format. And especially, there were more friends, I thought, in this one than they were in Rogue One. They had more of a best mates kind of, the way they were laughing and joking playing that card game. But it's great to see K2 in anything. He's a great character. So
yeah. Well, there was a lot of Revnog consumed by all accounts, wasn't there? So, How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought they had that one scene to establish them where they are that year later, where they've got to, and the dynamic there's changed. It's like Melshi's moved in, and and they've got K2 there, and probably the two of them are there getting drunk, taking the mickey out of him most evenings, playing cards by the look of it. And I thought it was really good. It really set it up for what was to come. But in these Andor episodes, but also it helps establish a little bit more for obviously we see Melshi in Rogue One, and it gives him even more significance, I think. Sets his context for that too. So absolutely brilliant. Really loved it.
Stu.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Scott said there. You've got these three, Andor, Melshi, and K2SO. Like I say, you had Rogue One. It was a standalone film. You didn't get too much time to get much character development or know too much about the characters. This is kind of like the meat to the bone sort of thing. It's like, for me, the Clone Wars animated series to the prequels. It gives you that character depth and information and stuff like that, which is, I think, sorely missed, and it has been for like I say, for the last few Star Wars series. So for this, it really does put the meat on the bones to the characters, and it just adds to their dynamic in Rogue One, which is a good thing. So positivity there. So
and Claire's obviously sent the message out, and they've picked it up, but they think it's Luthen, don't they? But they head out to rescue them. Essentially, another tension-filled scene, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably one of the shining pieces of the series. Again, the sort of the 10-15 minutes where the troops land, K2's left in the shuttle. They're getting the information from Kreia. At that point, as an audience member, I'm thinking, oh, Kreia's not making it out of here. There's just no way she's going to make it. And they even had the 70s sergeant major with the big bushy moustache. That's another thing that subconsciously I started to notice as, hang on, this is starting to fit in with A New Hope really well now, with the way the haircuts and everything. It's I mean,
little details.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the way that the whole sort of attack on the room panned out was just absolutely brilliantly filmed. I mean, I think we all probably guessed that K2 was going to come in at the end and save him, but even that
Yeah.
moment was surprising. Just the way you know, he finally got that slimy lieutenant. He finally he broke his neck and just lifted
That
him up
was
and held him up to the
brutal,
shield.
wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
brutal. And especially
But-
because
but-
the flashlight's shining on him, so you can just see him shaking and his head going
Yeah.
back and forth. I'm like,
It's like-
oh,
yeah,
wow.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but we did see what those droids are capable of in the previous arc, didn't we? And we see
Yeah.
Yeah.
now really why Andor wanted to keep one. So it's
Mm.
very,
Yeah.
very helpful, very useful. Then yeah, they left this episode on a bit of a cliffhanger. I don't know about you guys, but I think I would have liked potentially another week before they put the finale out, just to build the anticipation a little bit. What do you think, Shabby?
Yeah,
No
I can see
chance,
where you're
get
coming
it
from.
done. I'd have gone mental.
Yeah.
I was really
I would've gone,
invested by then. So I would have
Yeah.
gone, no. I think this is perfect the way they've done it. And you know, you
Yeah.
look back at Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett and all the others. If it was done like this, 3 episodes a week, because I think there's been times, especially with you guys, you've done shows on these, you know, live streams on these shows and so forth. If you had 3 together, you could turn out, well, one was all right, but this one was really good. Well, one was all right, but this one, and I love this format. It's like mini movies a week, and I think it
Yeah.
helps as well because so many people turn out, oh, I'm sick of Star Wars as a TV show once a week, but doing it as a mini movie every week.
Absolutely.
So no, I would have gone
Yeah.
mental if it would have finished and said
Yeah.
next week I'd have kicked my TV in. I'd have like, what?
No, you say that. I believe they are I've heard rumor that they're doing a cut of the series into Rogue One at some point. I don't know if that's just like a special for the cinemas, but either that or I dreamt it. I don't know, because no one else here seems to be
No, I've not
seems
heard
to have
that.
any
No.
knowledge of this.
You know, I had heard
Maybe
some-
I just made that up. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard they might show some Andor episodes at the cinema, and then follow up with a release of Rogue One. So but I didn't know about them.
It's worthy of being on the cinema, Scott. Do you not
Yeah,
think? I mean, some of the
absolutely.
landscapes and the visuals is right up there. It's funny as well because it's done to Rogue One what Rogue One did to A New Hope. Because I watched the first, what I did was I'd finished off that, and then it went. I don't know whether yours does or not, but in America on Disney Plus, it goes straight into Rogue One afterwards. You know, you press play and Rogue One comes on. So I watched the first 10 minutes, and it's funny because Krennic feels different, Cassian feels different. Do you know what I mean? And it heightens it up, just like, I mean, you can't heighten A New Hope, but you look at it, you know, through different eyes, if you will. A movie you'd seen 400 or 500 times, all of a sudden it feels like a new one. That's how Rogue One felt to me. You know, watching it, I was like, oh, now it makes more sense, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anything else to add on that episode before I move on to the finale? Anyone?
No.
No, just how
okay.
brutal it was.
I just
You know,
thought,
it's funny about. Go on, Scott.
I just thought the ISB troopers, I thought they were absolutely brilliant. I thought the whole way, I mean, Martin alluded to this. I just thought it was so authentically done. I thought, you know, this sort of like a SWAT team, I suppose they were, and you know that relationship, the sergeant lieutenant relationship. You know, here you are. So it was like Mosk and Cyril in the first season. It was that sort of, and that was just seemed so authentic and realistic the way they were portrayed, and the way that they were so professional. Going, you know, they weren't just stormtroopers stomping down the corridor. I thought it was all really well done, and with Parter Gas as well, back at the headquarters, you know, trying to follow what was going on, you know, and the whole thing.
I thought he was a great character. I thought he was a great character.
One of my favourite characters in the show.
Yeah,
he was
brilliant.
Yeah,
and you know, him and Krennic had a scene, didn't they, as well?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You know, and he said, you know, we're lucky we got this far without people finding out. And you know,
You got to know more about them, yeah.
I can't protect you, Leo. And he says, well, good luck to us both. And obviously, we'll talk about what happens. But amazing, Anton Lesser was brilliant throughout this whole show. You know, the 2 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal actor. You know, just held it together as this sort of middle manager type. You know, in you know. The version of the Gestapo, really, you know, he was just fantastic. So yeah, I just thought that was all very, very good.
I did like the way the hideout was aged as well. Looked like no one had lived there for years, you know, when Cassian gone there. And I did also like the bit when the doors opened and the Imperials all raised the gun. There was a 2 old couple left their cup of coffee. Like, what's going on? I love that. I thought that was great. Yeah, because I saw those doors open and I went, ah, and then it's just, you know what I mean? Me and Si sat there with a cup of coffee, you know.
He got his Ghostbusters meter, hadn't he? His PK meter, and it's like
Yeah,
they're on the wrong floor, and the old guy's just stood there with his cup of coffee, and they're just like, watch all these troopers file out.
He was leaning on the counter, only like Des, sat there with his coffee like that. Waiting. yeah, brilliant.
They're probably watching Ruby Wax on the telly, aren't they, or something?
Ruby Wax, yeah.
You have to ruin it, Scott.
Yeah, don't get Martin started on that. Yeah. All right. Well, episode 12, then the finale was Jeddah, Kyber, Urso. And as we expected, like you said, Martin, K2 comes in and he saves the day. Another great sort of start. The tension's there from the start. Do you feel like the escape plan worked for you, Martin, on this one, or were you expecting it to last a bit longer, be a bit more difficult?
I think, well, I did initially think when just 5 of them went into the corridor with the lieutenant, I thought to myself, well, there's 2 of them, Andor and Melshi, and let's be honest, and Kreia, and all 3 of them are very, very proficient with blasters at this point. So I thought taking just 5 troops in with you was a bit of a mistake to start with. But the fact that they had K2 there as well, I never had any major worries about them getting out. I did think Kreia might. Claire might. Might have to sort of just shout the information just before she dies after getting shot in the back or something, and they then head back with that information. But yeah, I mean, once I thought it was quite interesting once they'd left Coruscant and went to come back onto Yavin, you could see how much things have changed. You know, that we got to see Admiral Raddus again, and he was saying, thank God General Merrick's not here, otherwise he'd just shoot them out of the sky. I thought that was a great little callback, and they've definitely professionalized a lot more now. The rebels, they don't know who's on board, should they shoot it down, and General Draven's, take a charge of the whole situation. I thought that aspect, it was really, really interesting because we rarely got to see that side of the rebellion really in any of the movies or even in Rogue One, to be honest. So I mean, yeah, I can't keep gushing, to be honest with you, Adam. I didn't really dislike any of these 3 episodes.
Yeah. Okay. Stu, so that scene then, the escape scene, K2 was pretty brutal with it. Did you enjoy a lot of what was going on there? Did you think it could have lasted longer, or did you expect it to?
No, I'm happy with how it played out. It was obvious, like you say, K2 was going to come and save the day and help out and stuff like that. As for sending 5 officers in, is that because they only thought it was going to be her on her own? They didn't expect the others to be there.
That's what I was thinking.
You know, they could have been that. Because the guy said when they were looking at her on the cameras, oh, she's alone. There was no team, so that's probably why they only sent 5 in. Thought, oh, we'd take her down quite easy. But yeah, it was good. It was all right. I mean, the area reminded us of some rundown council estate in London somewhere, didn't it? So the old British there with his the old cockneys and stuff like that with the sergeant or lieutenant or whatever it was. But I overall, I did enjoy it. I thought it was good, and I'm glad they didn't, because sometimes you want it to be short and sweet. You don't want it dragged out too long because it just gets a bit tiresome, And to be honest, I thought that is it Kaya? Yeah. I thought she was going to end up getting shot and killed. So I'm kind of glad she didn't, and that she did survive.
Well, there were a few people. I think I was probably expecting to lose more characters. I thought, Vel and Willman as well. Scott, did you expect many more to make it out alive, or were you expecting us to lose quite a few more on this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess because they're not characters who we've seen in Rogue One or beyond, for obvious reasons. They were introduced for the Andor series. We were expecting that these characters would not survive, but instead they kind of maneuvered them into roles and positions where you don't need to see them in Rogue One or certainly not Star Wars or such like, and it leaves them there potentially to return to at some point if someone chooses to do that. But they gave them hopeful endings. Maybe it's better to say than happy endings. It's nice to leave that ambiguity, and I think that was, it was nice to, to not go with perhaps what our expectations were. I mean, I think everyone, 3 weeks ago, everyone thought Bix was going to die. Everyone was thinking Bix isn't going to make it out of the third arc, and in the end, obviously, it's completely different. Or continuation of her story as well. So I'm quite happy with how everyone ended up, really.
Yeah.
Surprised.
So we see Saw Gerrera on the holographic on the table, talking with Mon Mothma. He's reached the point of paranoia that we see him in at Rogue One. Satisfied with that there, Shabby?
I was. That's his character throughout the Clone Wars, throughout Rebels, throughout, this is who he was. In a way, he was like an extremist, and it's not, you could tell by the way Mon Mothma was talking to him, A, in this, and B, in Rebels, she's give up. She's tried and tried and tried, and you could see the way she's sighing when she's talking to him, and like she just shuts it off, and she looks straight at Drayden as if to say, you know what I mean? And I think they thought the same way about Luthen. Stu made it before that, like the Rebel Alliance is now established, and this is what they're doing. So these people are just a nuisance, they're not going to be told. And I think Andor was the same way, no one will tell me where to go, what to do. And then eventually they said, look, you can't do this anymore. This is the last time you'll be off doing it. They went to establish a rebel alliance, if you will. So I was happy with that. I was happy with the way they did it. And, especially when he's shouting at us, if to say, I'm not going to be told by you. You don't know what the war is. Sai alluded to it when Sai was on saying it, Mon Mothma doesn't really, he wasn't really unsure about her running a rebellion. But I liked that arc of that story because she's not from this sort of world. You know what I mean? She did it the other way through finance, if you will. And you know what I mean? It's easy to sit up in a nice mansion in Coruscant somewhere. And now she's in the trenches, if you will. But this guy's always been in the trenches. And so he's got a different aspect, and he can't trust anybody. And I suppose when you've been... Claire was the same when she was little. When she was watching those people getting shot at the range, she never looked away, and you could see her face. She was just, and that's how she became who she became, because she's been in it for ages. Cassian makes that point to Jyn Erso in Rogue One. I've been in this fight since I was... There's some characters in there that haven't been. Mon Mothma was one of them. So I liked the way Saw Gerrera talked to her, if you will, and said, I'm not on for it.
I like the chemistry between Mon Mothma and... because they are total opposites. Like you've got Saw Gerrera fighting in the trenches and he's getting his hands dirty. But then Mon Mothma's also been fighting a war, but she's been fighting a political war. So she's in the, is it the chamber, is it, or whatever it is called? The building that I got wrong. So yeah, in the chamber and stuff like that. And so she's putting the Senate chamber. Yeah, she's putting her point across, and she's making her war in her way. So you've got two totally different styles, and it's a culture shock to both of them, because he's more militant. He wants to get things done, where she's like, she's got a certain path to go. Red tape to cut and all that sort of stuff. So I like the chemistry between those two, and so I enjoyed that scene very much. Yeah.
Going back to Luthen's character, where do you feel like he sort of sat in that? Do you think he was right in the middle of the two of them?
Yeah, he was definitely the middleman.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me.
Just out of interest.
Yeah. I think Luthen started off like Saw initially, and then obviously he had the other side of his face was with Mon Mothma, which he was getting the finances from, and like Stu says, he's definitely meets in the middle. But it took both sides to come together to create the Rebel Alliance, which goes back to my point earlier that if Luthen hadn't, I don't honestly genuinely think that the way this has been portrayed is, if Luthen hadn't set up what he'd set up, then that rebel base on Yavin probably wouldn't have existed at that time.
Yeah,
it's all down to all his hard work and Claire's as well, I should say. All those rebel cells together, whether they were worthy of Mon Mothma's Rebel Alliance or Saw Gerrera's partisans. Fantastic.
Yeah, well,
you're
let's
right. Picard, Dantooine, Jeddah, they weren't found. They were found by these extremists, if you will. So yeah, that's a good point.
And Saw also. Sorry, go on, Scott.
I would say for a stable rebellion to work, you've got to have political leadership. You've got to have strong military leadership as well, and that's what they've got.
Yeah.
You've got admirals and generals now who've probably defected, or they've come from other planets' militaries and joined, and then you've got Bail Organa, and you've got Mon Mothma, and you've got those other 2 senators who were there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are others who appear obviously in Rogue One. They sort of implied that the rest of the quorum was going to be arriving. So it had to go from Saw's guerrillas were only ever going to be that, weren't they? Sort of hit and run tactics. Sort of, for something that could actually challenge the Empire and offer a solution for other planets to come on board and fight with the Rebel Alliance. You've got to have a figurehead like Mon Mothma as well, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned the Rebel Alliance Council there a little bit, Scott. Was it good for you guys to see some of those Rogue One characters back? Martin?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've always said I think consistency is key to when you're watching something as like Star Wars, whether it be a long-running TV show or a movie series, whatever. You have to have that continuity and just to have the sort of, you recognize that voice of the woman who was saying this is ridiculous, and the guy who was totally against it as well, and it instantly just falls into place. So it's the little things again like that for me that make a show a step above, if that makes sense. It's just such a shame they couldn't get Jimmy Smits back for Bail Organa, because don't get me wrong, I completely forgot it wasn't Jimmy Smits when I was watching it, because he did a really good job. But it's just that little, it would have ticked that little extra box just to make it even more amazing than it already is. But it was great to see him back, and they were just as whiny as they were in Rogue One and unsure of themselves, and they shouldn't be trying to ruffle the feathers of the Empire, etc. So it was great to see him back.
Yeah. Do you think we could have had a few more though that we knew, Stu, like Antok Merrick? They mentioned him, but we didn't get to see him.
No, because
R2-SHW.
I was quite happy. I was quite happy with who they had in there. No, did you say R2-D2 in the end there?
R2-SHW, Antok's droid, I think.
Oh right, okay.
That was a question on one of your quizzes, Stu. That was a question on one of your quizzes.
Oh God, I can't remember. But no, I was happy with how it was. I think there's you don't want to overdo it with characters that we know. It's just nice to sort of bring them in. Just having him mentioned is enough, and it's like General Dodonna as well. It's good that they mentioned him as well.
Yeah.
What would have been nice as well, like they did in Rogue One, where they mentioned General Hera, maybe have like her mentioned or something like that. Just because then for me that ties in Rebels, because in the last arc there was a scene where Andor's rescuing Mon Mothma and stuff like that. Now we've already had that kind of scene in Rebels, and I think I don't know whether I don't know what's happened with that, because she gave the speech from the Ghost, didn't she? But then this time she's done
different speech.
Is it a different speech?
It's a different speech. Yeah,
Okay.
she gives because after she'd been rescued and taken to the safe house, me and Andy on last week's episode were talking about this, and you hear Claire say that they're going to send her off on a freighter, which I'm assuming would be the Ghost, and they're going to reenact. But they're going to reenact it just like they did with the flag on Iwo Jima in World War II. They actually had to refilm them with the US soldiers of the flag. So she redid the speech that they submitted out to the galaxy. So it was a clever way for them not to have to do the speech from Rebels. Because let's be honest, the speech she gave in this show was much better than the speech she gave in Rebels. So I think it was a really clever way to get around that. So yeah.
But it did work for Rebels, though. I mean, it did work.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But this hits more to home. The character I would have liked to have seen here was Bodhi Rook. I'd like to have seen him defect from, because in Rogue One he has his own story, if you will, and he ends up at Jeddah talking to Saw Gerrera. I would have liked to have seen him leave the even if it was only a short snippet. Something. I had a feeling we're going to see Bodhi Rook here, and then we're going to go up his aspects of why he actually left and defected the Empire. But they never showed us. I thought, well, it's just
that's a good point.
It's not, something that I would like to have seen his backstory to say this is why he left. Because in Rogue One he just says he's left, but he never actually says Well, he said he knew Galen Erso, and I think that would have been given more of an opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To cement Galen Erso's name, if you will. So
Yeah. But you could have even had Galen Erso handing over the recording to him.
something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but we all know that happened, so it's not so bad. So the final montage, then we get to see all of their sort of outcomes. We see Andor and K2 heading off. How did you guys like that final montage? Did it all work for you as a closer? Stu, we'll start you.
Yeah, I really did, because Andor goes off to meet that guy on that
The ring
asteroid.
Caffeine.
So that was pretty cool. It was interesting seeing where Dead Ramiro ended up. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Seeing Saw Gerrera there with Cheddar in the background and the Star Destroyer over that, you just like, okay, roll on Rogue One. And then you see Krennic as well. Again, I thought it was a very fitting finale. I loved the way they did that montage at the end and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty cool. It was decent.
Yeah. Scott, were you expecting to see our friend Kino Loy in with Dedra at all?
Well, there'd been a rumor that he was going, like a year or more ago, that he was going to appear. And so I was sort of thinking, where? I thought he was going to be on Yavin, just be a trooper, or, somebody, filling up an X-Wing with petrol or something. I thought he would be in that kind of a role, perhaps. But no, I read subsequently that they just thought it wouldn't do justice to his, the One Way Out episode. It just wouldn't do justice to that scene, really, to have had him somehow escape and end up on Yavin or such like. So yeah, I was a bit surprised. But yeah, there's so many people you could have liked to have seen. I'm a huge fan of Peter Cushing. I'd have loved to have seen Tarkin, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would have been perfect.
If you brought Tarkin in, how would you have woven him into the story? Or would you have just given us almost like a gratuitous shot of him towards the very end? You could have got away with that. It would have been, it would have perhaps been nice, but it's in no way a criticism, and again, I did think maybe we would see a bit more of the story of Bodhi and Galen Erso possibly played out a little bit. There just wasn't enough time, despite 24 episodes of this show. There still didn't end up being enough time for all of that. But I thought it was a beautiful end, really, and the music was fantastic. It has been throughout. And then obviously there was that final reveal. I was so pleased that B2 was safe and well and still enjoying playing with his little yellow friend. And then there was Bix in the cornfield, and that was sort of that was quite a moment. Wasn't what I was expecting, really.
No, Shabby, then Disney really nailed something here. I think that generally both the
Tony Gilroy
critics
nailed it.
and the fans.
Tony Gilroy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll put it that way.
Do you think Disney will then learn from Andor's success and make some more Star Wars like this? Are we going to see any of these characters in something else?
I hope so, and that's one of the reasons why I'm glad most of them didn't die. I mean, the thing about it, they established these characters. You'd love to see Deidre again, and the way this is written, it's like, for example, when you saw her in the prison, it was a 20-second clip. But because how well written them prison scenes were in the first season, we all went, "Oh no, she's ended up," and it was 20 seconds. But they gave it such a good background where she was. We all, in a way, felt for her. But then you got to look at it that way. This character was so well written. We're feeling for a woman in the Empire. We're like, oh man. And so I'd love to see her again. I would love to see. I'm going to stick with what I've said, and I've said it since day one. To me, Star Wars should be for everybody. I don't think there should be an adult Star Wars, a kid Star Wars, or this Star Wars. I think it should be from 8 to 80. Everyone could watch it. Apart from a couple of things in Andor, I think it's flawless. And the only couple of things that I've got is I'd like my children to watch it. Do you see what I mean? But it's like an homage to us lot. I don't know whether you noticed or not. There was a scene in the last episode where Vel and Mon Mothma were talking in the Rebel Alliance to the one Yavin. Did you notice what was on the walls? So on the walls was the card backs, the vintage card backs. It was done. The track was on. So have a look. So if you want to look back, you'll actually see the
really?
card backs, the
Oh,
wow.
two white card backs on a black thing. And I got it straight away. I went, no way, they've put the card backs on the wall as a, and it's so prominent. But it's one of those things, because it's so well written, you're so invested in them two talking, you don't seem to realize it, But yeah, the card backs there, the track on their old school card backs is on the wall, which I thought was super cool. Yeah, but I'm happy the way it ended. I did think, Scott, that when that Empire guy came in for is it called Porticast, the Patacast, and said they're waiting for you, I thought we're going to see Tarkin then. But the way he put his DL-44 down, and then at the end he just put his hand
check
up.
him out with his guns.
Oh, I watched your quiz. I just loved that part because he came out and he just bowed his head down, knowing what's going to happen, and he gave him the respect and the time to do it. I just thought it was so well written, it's so well done. So,
and he was listening to Nemec's manifesto as well before, wasn't he?
Oh,
yes.
And it's his face, though, Scott. The way the way you could see two sides, though, of it, Scott. It was like he was actually listening to what this guy was saying about the rebellion and so forth.
And
brilliant.
but that him listening to that broadcast from the manifesto says, because the only person who had possession of that manifesto was Andor, which means Andor, unseen to us in between the years that we didn't get to see, has got that recording out there into the galaxy, and it's spread like wildfire. So just a teeny little scene, and you put together that Andor's been up to this little project of his to get this manifesto out to the galaxy. It's just wow. I mean, it's so layered, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible. And yes, just to answer the question quickly, Adam, I hope Disney look at this and say, look at the critical response, look at the fan response. I mean, overwhelmingly, most people have said this is probably the best thing we've seen since Disney took over. And why not try and continue to do something along these lines by getting qualified people in, good actors, and excellent writing. I mean, it's just second to none. So yeah, I really.
Well, they all make it out like we have a problem with women in Star Wars. The main characters of Andor season 2 was 5 women, and they were all perfect, every one of them. And it doesn't matter how many streams I've seen or people talking behind the scenes, not one person has gone, because they were so well written, and they were so invested. We were so invested in the stories and these characters. So I'll say it once and for all: none of us care, someone's race or gender or anything. So
what are the main things we've like sort of like spoke about today? Story, character development. They're pivotal for Star Wars, and they're pivotal for any kind of like TV series and stuff like that. But we have missed so much decent storytelling in recent Star Wars. We've missed so much decent character building and character arcs in recent Star Wars. It is refreshing to talk about it. Now, I saw one of your and talk positively about it, and I saw a comment on your last episode where the one of your followers said it was a classic like Star Wars. Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say it was a classic. It was good. I still think there are things that for me didn't quite sit right. I think with Star Wars, you've got like all sorts of different ingredients and stuff like that to make it decent Star Wars. Music being one of them. That wedding scene, I wasn't very happy with that. But also when you watch Star Wars, everything sort of like alluded to. It's like Anakin when he was like had the lightsaber in Revenge of the Sith when he took out the kids. You didn't see it. You didn't need to see it, but you knew it happened. They alluded to it. It's like that with the Tusken Raiders. He took them out. You didn't see it, but you knew it was going on. They alluded to it. And it was also I don't like talking about the sequels, but even when the First Order are shooting those like villagers, you saw the guns and stuff going. You didn't see it. To actually physically see that in a Star Wars series or property, that doesn't really sit right with me, because like Shabby says, he wants to sit and watch it with his kids. Who, in all honesty, is going to be able to sit down and watch Andor with their kids? Because like, and Shabby said, Star Wars should be for everybody and should be able to be watched by everybody. Not have your adults, not have your kids section, not have your LGBTQ plus section. It should be for everyone across the board. And I think
Everyone.
that's one fundamental flaw that I have with Andor. There are certain aspects in it that bored the living bejesus out of me, and I just thought it's not needed to be seen. And I've said it as well. It's set in a galaxy far, far away. It doesn't need to be relatable to absolutely everything and everybody set on Earth, because it takes the magic away. And that was the one good thing that Star Wars had when it first came out. It was different, totally different. Nothing has ever been seen like it before. And there's the magic. And I think as close as Andor was to being as Star Warsy as Star Wars can be, I still think it missed out on a few vital elements for it to be deemed as a classic. And
yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny you should say that as well, because the way Luthen stabbed himself, you never saw it. And that was more impactful because he had his back to her and he was talking to her. So that came out of nowhere, the way he just
because you didn't know what was going that took me by surprise. Oh wow, so there was more of an element of surprise.
I get what you mean. It's not as if war proved anything. It's just funny that sort of violence being in Star Wars. Do you see what I mean? But then again, we've had arms cut off, we've had heads cut off. Do you know what I mean?
But did you know in the original Star Wars, the only person to ever throw a punch was Han Solo at Lando in The Empire Strikes Back. Other than that, there was no real punches thrown. You didn't really see anything like that. And now you've got like droids like throwing women across the air. You've got like seeing them shoot women and children, or women and people, innocent people. Do we need to see that? Is that what you want to see?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think it's a fair point. And just before we get to the ratings, because Adam's going to get angry in a minute, that's going over time. I want to throw out a quick question to everybody, including Adam. Now, Andor is this side of Star Wars, and so let's take the finale of season 2 of The Mandalorian, and it's this side of Star Wars. Now, I loved both of those equally for different reasons. In Mandalorian season 2 finale, I got the Luke Skywalker, the magic that I always wanted to see him after Return of the Jedi. But in Andor, I get the more adult sensibilities, the story, the writing, etc., the quality in acting. If you guys had to choose, I know you're going to say you shouldn't have to choose which one of the two you would want. I'm going to tell you which one I would choose. I would go for the Luke Skywalker every single time. As much as I love this show, but the Luke Skywalker returning at the end of The Mandalorian is the Star Wars that I wish I could watch every week, as much as I love The Mandalorian. So Stu, what would you
go for? No, I agree. I'm not going to disagree with you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Scott?
Andor.
Okay, fair enough. Jabs?
Star Wars to me has always been about Luke Skywalker, so it's like. But I think when you get to our age as well, I think our love of Star Wars is based on nostalgia, and so we've grown up with this, and so to see a character that we've loved for 40, 50 years doing what he did, and that's something we've wanted to see since we were little boys. I mean, and it was just perfect television. That to me, I mean, this is the character I've wanted, and I'm not going to talk about the 3 newer movies, but that wasn't the Luke I wanted to see. This was, and so for him to do it, but I've got to admit, to compare him is hard work. You know what I mean? I don't like to compare any Star Wars with other Star Wars. I enjoyed Skeleton Crew, but it's you know what I mean. It's different to this. So
I don't say that lightly. I mean, it's probably 51% and or 49% that the Sky thing, and on another day it could be the other way around. But that's how close it is. So
why'd you hate Luke Skywalker, Scott?
Adam, what do you think?
I'd pick the Mandalorian episode, and I think it's like you say, it brings the emotions that you get from watching Star Wars as we know it, like the originals and the prequels. I don't feel like we said it so many times with Andor that in season 1 you could have taken it out of the Star Wars universe. Essentially, it didn't feel like Star Wars. And that's not to say that it's not Star Wars, and it's not to say that that was a problem, but it doesn't feel like Star Wars as much. And that's the same I feel with season 2. If we're talking about this from a Star Wars perspective, then I've got to go with the Mandalorian. So That's just my
I
thought.
think the last episode was very much Star Wars because it led into Rogue One, and for me, Rogue One is pretty much Star Wars because that leads straight into A New Hope. So I think the last episode was very much Star Wars and in fitting with what we're used to when it comes to Star Wars. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe the music does it too, because if you notice at the end
Yeah.
credits, he played the Star Wars music, and it was like you feel it straight
John
away.
Williams.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe in this last episode, if they would have played Williams' music straight through it, I think we seem to forget how much of a character John Williams' music is in Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, adding that little bit will make us all go. You know, even I remember when they did it with in the Mandalorian when Ahsoka had baby Grogu, and you could hear Yoda's theme, and it straight away you go, "Oh, this is it." Do you know what I mean? So they could have missed out there. They could have added a little bit more, because even Rogue One did that. It go into a John Williams theme and so forth. You know, you had elements of, you know.
I was
Or
quite
even had the
surprised that we
Imperial
didn't hear the Rogue One theme. You know, I thought we might get that.
As Stu says, the Imperial March. I mean, that was crying out for certain scenes in this, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Imperial March. So
yeah.
Right.
It didn't have to be full on. It could have just been very subtle.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Stop now, guys. Let's get the let's get your ratings out of 10 then for this final arc and the series overall. We'll go straight to Shabby first.
9 out of 10. I loved it. I did. It's I think it's one of those series I'm going to watch over and over and over again, just like the first one. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Was it a 9 out of 10 for the arc or the series or both?
The arc, the series, everything. You know, I just loved it.
Yeah. All right, Scott.
For this arc, 9 3/4. For the series overall, 9.5. I think.
Yeah. Okay, Stu.
Okay, for this arc, I go 9, but for the whole series, I go 8.5.
Wow, that's good. That's really good. I think for the series as a whole, I've got to go 9, and 9 for both. I mean, I'm after the last 3 episodes, I'm really tempted to give it a 10, but I you know, there's no Jedi or the Force in it, so I'm going to go 9.
I think I'm in agreement with you. I think it's 9. I think the episode 10 and 11 were fantastic. I think I wanted a little bit more out of the finale. I'm not really sure what that is, but I think there was something not quite there for me in the finale. So I'm going to say, but then I think the true finale is Rogue One, isn't it? Don't you think?
True.
Oh yeah, good point. That's very well.
Good point.
I like
Very
that.
good point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. Well, that is it then for Andor. Let's see if our guests have anything coming up on their channels before we go. Shabby.
ZSO on Friday. He's on Tez's channel, but top 5 with Keith Guppy and Only One Kenobi's on Monday. So we're doing their top 5s.
Nice.
Really good one.
Nice, Stu.
Yeah, pub quiz starts Sunday. Shabby, I think you're involved in the first one, aren't you?
Yeah.
So so that's it for the time being. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Yeah. Scott, anything to promote?
No, not really. I mean, I'm looking forward to going on the top 5 with Shabby in a few weeks' time, and the pub quiz as well coming up. All of those are around mid-June, so I'm looking forward to doing both of those. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, cool.
Brilliant. Good. Well, thanks everyone then for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed our review shows. And if you did, please give that like button a click. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll leave you guys with this. The rebellion isn't here anymore. It's everywhere. Goodbye.
Cheers.